After 8 years, my husband sold our home for his mistress, but forgot one tiny detail. I own it. How I turned my cheating husband's illegal move into his biggest regret. Y'all, when I tell you my man played himself harder than a Netflix villain in the finale, I mean it. So picture this. I'm at work, conference room packed, fake, smiling my way through another boring meeting. My phone buzzes. It's my husband, Brandon. I'm thinking he's going to say something basic like, "Hey babe, how's your day?" Nope. Man hits me with, "I'm divorcing you. Sold the apartment already. Good luck figuring out where you'll live." Excuse me? And this man had the audacity, the sheer nerve, to say it like he was dropping a mic, like he just won something. Nah, sir. Brandon didn't drop a mic, he dropped the ball. I'm gripping my phone like it's the last slice of pizza on earth, trying not to explode. So I say, all calm and composed, "You sold what now?" He goes, full smug mode. "The apartment. Me and Nicole need the cash to start our life together. She deserves better than that shoebox anyway." Nicole, the homewrecker, the mystery girl whose name I'd low-key been suspecting for months. Late nights, sketchy business trips, and all the emotional distance. Yeah, the red flags were waving like it was a parade. But hearing him drop her name so casually, like I was the side character in their love story, that flipped a switch. So I hit him with the real power move. Sounds good. Y'all, I wasn't about to let him hear me cry. Nah. I swallowed that pain like a boss and started plotting. Because what Brandon didn't know? That apartment he just sold? It was legally mine. Yup. Months ago, we refinanced the place and I, Amara, not your average soon-to-be ex-wife, had the deed transferred solely to my name. And Brandon? Too lazy, too arrogant, and way too busy sneaking around with Nicole to actually read the paperwork he signed. His biggest mistake? Thinking I wouldn't fight back. And oh, honey, I was just getting started. So after the divorce bomb Brandon dropped on me earlier that day, I get back to my hotel room, still a little shook, but not broken. Nah, that whole cry and beg thing, not in my era. He wanted war? Cool. I came ready with a lawyer and legal smoke. First call, my girl Chloe. Not only my lawyer, but also my ride or die since college. She picks up, I give her the rundown. Every trash detail. Me, calm, voice steady, heart beating like crazy, but we stay composed. Chloe listens, then hits me with, "Wait, he sold the apartment? Does he even know he can't do that without your permission?" I'm like, apparently he skipped the legal part and went straight to Fantasyland with Nicole, thought he was funding their dream life. The pause. The laugh. Chloe goes, "Girl, he's done. That sale is invalid. You're the sole owner. If he took a single dollar from that buyer, we're talking full-blown fraud." Fraud, y'all. The moment she said it, something in me snapped into place. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was a game, and he was already losing. I go, "Okay, what's next?" Chloe's like, "Step 1, we notify the buyer and shut this mess down. Step 2, formal letter to Brandon, explaining just how deep he's in it, and if he keeps acting slick, court. We're taking this to the finish line." I hang up. And that weird feeling of chaos that had been swirling around me all day, gone. Replaced with one thing, pure cold-blooded clarity. Brandon thought he could erase me, thought he could push me out of the life I built. He thought he was the main character in this breakup saga. But babe, he just cast himself as the clown. The rest of the trip? All business. I buried the emotions, locked them away like old files on a dead laptop, and channeled every ounce of energy into the plan ahead. Yeah, it still stung being betrayed by the man I built a life with, but But the thought of watching Brandon's smug little fantasy collapse, that gave me life. Like actual motivation I hadn't felt in months. By the time I boarded my flight home, I wasn't just over it, I was ready to burn the whole illusion to the ground. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about reclaiming everything he tried to steal. My home, my peace, my narrative. I stared out the window during the flight, replaying everything. Brandon's shameless arrogance, how he didn't even try to hide what he was doing. Like I was just some character he could write out of the script whenever it suited him. But instead of spiraling, I stayed focused. I wasn't broken, I was just getting started. He thought I was powerless, but the joke's on him. I'd been playing the long game, without even realizing it. Plane touches down, and the second I grab my suitcase off the carousel, I'm calling Chloe. I'm back, I say. What's our next move? She doesn't miss a beat. We've already contacted the buyer, she says, brisk and no nonsense like the queen she is. They were shocked and mad, not at you, at him. They're on our side, which strengthens the case. I blink. Wait, they're cooperating? Totally. And I sent Brandon the formal notice this morning, broke down every detail, the illegal sale, your sole ownership, and the part about, fraud. Has he responded? Nope. But if I had to guess, he's fuming. I smirk to myself. Good. Let him stew. Let him sweat. Brandon had built this little fantasy world, thinking he could just toss me aside, cash in on what we built, and run off into the sunset with Nicole. But what he didn't know, the sunset was about to set on him. When I got home, the apartment was dead silent, but not peaceful, just off. His stuff was still everywhere, jackets slung over the chair like he owned the place. Shoes flopped by the door like nothing had changed, but it had. The energy? Different. Heavy, cold, like the walls knew what he did. I set my suitcase down, exhaled slowly, and waited. Because I knew Brandon wasn't going to stay quiet for long. And I was right. That evening, the front door slammed open like we were on a reality show. Brandon stormed in, red-faced and absolutely losing it. He had his phone in one hand and Chloe's letter in the other, waving it like a lunatic. What the hell is this? He barked. You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine. Oh, Brandon. Sweet, delusional Brandon. I crossed my arms, calm as hell. No, it's not. The deed's been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own. He blinked, confused at first, then angry. What are you talking about? Without missing a beat, I walked to the table and pulled out the folder I'd prepped, held up the deed like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred. You signed off on it. Or maybe you just skimmed the paperwork, like you always do. Boom. Silence. For a moment, he had nothing. Just stood there like his brain was buffering. Then came the sneer. The weak attempt at gaslighting. You think you're so smart, huh? This doesn't change anything. I already made the deal. You'll look like the fool when it all crashes down. I didn't flinch. The sale's already void, Brandon. The buyer knows, and they're ready to sue you if the deposit isn't returned. I stepped closer, eyes locked. My voice dropped, razor sharp. And if you've spent even 1 cent of that money, you're in real trouble. That's when I saw it. The crack. His confidence wavered. For the first time, he looked scared. He tried to hide it, muttered, "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I absolutely do," I said, steady as stone. "You've spent years acting like I'm too naive to notice. But I've been watching, learning, waiting. And now, it's your turn to deal with everything you thought you'd get away with." He started pacing like a caged animal. Frustration boiling. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here." And that, my friends, is when I smiled. Because he still didn't get it, but he was about to. I looked him dead in the eyes and raised an eyebrow. Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay, for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy to figure out your next move. But let me make one thing clear. I'm not going anywhere. And just like that, the power shifted. For real this time. The next few days? Total chaos, but not for me. Brandon went from loud and cocky to desperate and unhinged real fast. He called non-stop. Left voicemails that flipped from, "Please, babe, let's talk," to full-on, "You'll regret this" mode. It was pathetic. He was spiraling, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Meanwhile, Chloe? She was working her legal magic behind the scenes like the badass she is. She made sure every single loose end was locked down. The buyer? Furious. They rescinded the deal and threatened Brandon with legal action for wasting their time and money. And Chloe? She didn't stop there. She drafted the opening paperwork for the divorce. During one of our check-ins, she looked at me across the table and said, "You're in a really strong position, Amara. Brandon's got zero leverage. Between the voided sale, the fraud risk, and his name being nowhere on the deed, he has no leg to stand on. If he wants to avoid a lawsuit or worse, he'll have to play nice." Her words hit me like fresh air after being underwater for too long. Relief. Yeah. But also this wild realization. I had let Brandon run my life for years. I had swallowed his dismissiveness, smiled through his arrogance, convinced myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now, that fight was exactly what I'd needed. Not just to shut him down, but to finally choose me. By now, I could see it clearly, just how much of myself I'd sacrificed in that relationship, how much space I'd made for his ego, how many times I'd swallowed my voice so he could hear his own louder. Not anymore. I was done giving. It was time to take it all back. One evening, my best friend Laura came over to help me reclaim my space, literally. We started boxing up Brandon's crap, his mismatched socks, those ugly ties he thought made him look executive, and all the stuff he clearly thought I'd just keep around. Laura held up one particularly hideous tie, laughing. "How's he taking all this?" I couldn't help but laugh too. Not well. He still thinks he can sweet-talk his way out of it. She rolled her eyes and dropped the tie in the box. Good. He doesn't deserve a single inch of this place, or your time. I nodded, and in that moment, something clicked. For years, I'd carried the emotional and financial weight of our marriage, while Brandon strutted around like he built it all himself. But now, I had people in my corner, real ones, and that changed everything. And then, just when I thought the drama had peaked, Brandon pulled the dumbest move yet. He brought her to the apartment. Yup, Nicole, the mistress, the wrecking ball in heels. I was sitting at the dining table, casually reviewing paperwork, when they waltzed in like they were touring a damn Airbnb. Nicole had her arm looped around his, her eyes scanning the room like she was already redecorating it. She gave me this smug little smirk and purred, "So this is where we're staying?" I stood up. My heart was pounding, but my face? Stone. "No," I said. "This is where Brandon was staying. You won't be staying here at all." Her smile dropped. She blinked, confused, and looked at Brandon like he was supposed to fix it. But he looked just as dumbfounded. "What is this?" he snapped. "This," I said, gesturing around the apartment like Vanna White presenting receipts, "is my home. Not yours, not hers. And definitely not a hotel for two cheaters who thought they could bulldoze their way into my life after stabbing me in the back." Nicole's face froze, that fake confidence cracking just enough to show the panic underneath. She said nothing. But Brandon? Oh, he lost it. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You're being unreasonable." I met his gaze, dead calm. "No, Brandon. What's unreasonable is thinking you could illegally sell my home, pocket the money, cheat on me, and then show up here with your side piece like you're entitled to anything." That was the last time he ever raised his voice to me in my home. "You're lucky I haven't pressed criminal charges," I said, arms crossed, steady as stone. Brandon stood there in the doorway, red-faced, sweating frustration, while Nicole clutched her purse like it could protect her from the chaos she just walked into. "You're being ridiculous, Amara," he pleaded, voice cracking under the pressure. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I stepped forward, cool and deadly calm. "This is my home, Brandon. The deed's been in my name for months. You signed it, remember? Oh wait, you probably didn't even read it. Just like always. So no, this isn't your home anymore." Nicole whipped her head toward him. "Wait, what is she talking about?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." Brandon flinched. "It's complicated," he stammered, trying to wave her off. "I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I snapped, stepping closer. "You tried to sell a place you don't own. That deal? Void. You have nothing." Nicole's expression shattered. "You mean the money? The money you told me we had?" Her voice rose, her confidence slipping. "Oh my God! You lied about that too." "Nicole, let me explain," Brandon begged, hands up like he was trying to stop a car crash with prayer. But I cut him off. "Number, I'll explain. Brandon tried to sell the apartment behind my back so he could pocket the cash and run off into the sunset with you. But what he didn't know is, I had the deed transferred into my name months ago. So not only did he fail to sell it, he committed fraud trying." Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Fraud?" she whispered, stepping away from him. "Are you serious?" "Oh, I'm very serious," I said, ice in my voice. "And if he doesn't have his things out of here by the end of the day, I will press charges." That was it. Brandon's little mask crumbled. "Amara, please," he said, voice suddenly small. "We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out like this." My voice hardened. "You threw me out the moment you made that phone call. You laughed while telling me to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Brandon. You tried to ruin me. So don't stand there pretending to be the victim now." Nicole backed toward the door, eyes darting between us. "This is insane," she muttered. "You didn't tell me any of this. You said you had it handled." He turned to her, full desperation mode. "Nicole, I can fix this. I just need—" She shut him down with a raised hand. "Don't. Just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I didn't even try to hide my smile. "Looks like you're on your own now," I said, turning to him. "Let's talk about what happens next." He dropped onto the couch, buried his face in his hands. "Amara, I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this." "You're right," I said, pulling a folder from the kitchen and dropping it on the coffee table in front of him. "I don't have to, but I'm going to." He looked at it, pale. "Is that?" "Divorce paperwork. Chloe already drafted it. I suggest you sign it fast. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on." He stared at it like it might explode. "You really hate me that much?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Brandon. I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything. Someone who loved you. A home we built together. And you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stood there, heart pounding, but calm. "I want you out by the end of the day. Take your things. Figure out where you're going. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace." He opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. His shoulders slumped like the truth finally landed. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "And Brandon, don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's handling everything, and next time you cross a line, the courts will be involved." I didn't look back. Because this wasn't the end of something broken. It was the beginning of something finally free. As I opened the door, Brandon finally stood up. He grabbed his coat, but couldn't even look me in the eye. His footsteps were slow, heavy. The kind of weight that only comes when you realize the game is over and you lost. For a second, I felt something. Not sadness for him, but for what could have been. If he had just been the man I thought I married. If he hadn't thrown it all away for ego, lies, and cheap validation. But that feeling, it passed just as quickly as it came. I closed the door behind him and locked it with the brand new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not him, would take that away from me again. The silence afterward was loud, deafening, but not in a bad way. It was like the apartment had been holding its breath for years and now it was finally exhaling. No more Brandon. No more entitlement. No more manipulation hiding behind fake smiles and gaslighting. Just me, my space, and the realization that I hadn't just won against him, I'd won against every fear that ever told me I couldn't stand up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room and took it all in. His oversized gaming chair, gone. The ugly framed jerseys he insisted on putting up like it was a frat house, gone. That tacky glass coffee table he swore was modern, out. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, mine again. That night, Lauren came over with takeout and a bottle of wine, aka the holy cure for post-breakup energy. She flopped onto the couch, eyes wide. "Is he really gone?" she asked. Like she needed to hear it one more time to believe it. "Gone, and not coming back," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "I gave him until the end of the day." He packed. No argument. Lauren raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked mine against hers, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. To never letting anyone walk all over me again. And over the next few days, I rebuilt. I reclaimed my space, not just physically but emotionally. I moved the furniture, brought my favorite artwork into the living room, hung up prints that made me smile, lit candles that made the whole place feel soft, warm, safe. It wasn't just redecorating, it was rebirth. Because this apartment, it wasn't a shared space anymore. It wasn't haunted by his presence. It was a reflection of me, who I'd become, what I'd survived, and how I'd risen from it all stronger than ever. As I opened the door, Brandon slowly stood up. No final words, no eye contact, just silence and a coat slung over his shoulder like some sad exit scene from a movie he thought he'd be the star of. His footsteps were slow, dragging like dead weight. For a split second, I felt something, not for him, but for the version of our life that could have existed, if he'd been the man I believed in. If he hadn't torched everything with lies and ego, but that flash of sadness, it vanished, replaced by something stronger, relief. I closed the door behind him, turned the lock, and for the first time, used the new key I'd had made. That sound? It was like sealing a new chapter. This was my home now, mine. And no one, especially not him, was ever taking it from me again. The apartment was so quiet after he left, it almost rang in my ears. But the silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful, clean, real. It felt like I could finally breathe in my own space. His energy, the guilt trips, the arrogance, the emotional weight, all of it was gone. What was left? Me. Just me. The home I built, and the realization that I didn't just win against him. I won against every doubt that ever whispered I wasn't strong enough to walk away. I stood in the middle of the living room, just taking it in. The spot where his ugly gaming chair used to be, empty. The framed jerseys that made the apartment feel like a glorified man cave, gone. And that tacky glass coffee table he insisted on keeping, out. Everything looked brighter, cleaner, like the apartment had exhaled right along with me. That evening, Lauren came over, takeout in one hand, wine in the other, like the real MVP. She flopped onto the couch, dramatic as always. "So, is he really gone? Gone and not coming back?" I said, pouring us each a glass. I gave him until the end of the day to pack. He didn't even argue. She raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. We clinked our glasses, and I could feel the weight of the past week finally lifting. To never letting anyone walk over me again, I added. Over the next few days, I started reclaiming the space, piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, lit candles that smelled like vanilla and peace, and filled the space with things that made me feel good. It wasn't just redecorating. It was therapy. It was turning the apartment into a mirror, not of who we were, but of who I am now. Brandon kept trying to pull me back, and every attempt just reminded me why I was done. Chloe called with an update on the legal side of things, her voice calm, fierce, and filled with the kind of confidence that made me feel powerful. So, the fraud charges are off the table, she said. The buyer doesn't want to pursue them, probably just wants to forget the disaster Brandon caused. But the divorce paperwork? It's moving fast. Once he signs, you'll be officially free. Free. That word hit different. Not just because it meant the end of the marriage, but because it meant the end of everything I'd been silently carrying for years. The resentment, the constant self-doubt, that heavy, suffocating feeling of being stuck in a marriage where I felt invisible, unless I was useful. All of it was being peeled off me, layer by layer. Of course, Brandon being Brandon, he didn't go quietly. He texted a few times. Messy, embarrassing stuff. First, it was weak apologies. I made a mistake. Can't we at least talk about this? Then came the emotional manipulation. You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that really what you want? I didn't reply. Not once. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't wasting my energy trying to fix a thing that was already smashed beyond repair. He made his choices. Now he could live in them. By the end of that week, the apartment didn't just look different, it felt like a whole new dimension. Warm, inviting, mine. I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea one night, watching the city lights blink through the window, and just sat there. No noise, no chaos, just quiet and clarity. Brandon's betrayal? It shattered something, but maybe that's what I needed, because it also woke me up. For way too long, I believed the lie that I didn't deserve more, that I had to keep settling for the scraps he'd throw me between ego trips, that loving him meant shrinking myself. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming the apartment, I was reclaiming me. Fast forward a month, and my life? Unrecognizable, not because of some extreme makeover or spiritual retreat or whatever, but because of how it felt. The apartment was still the same square footage, same view, same walls. But now, it radiated me. My colors, my textures, my favorite playlists humming through the speakers. It was peace, for the first time in forever. Without Brandon's clutter, his oversized ego, and that constant emotional weight hanging in every corner, the place finally breathed. It wasn't just a home again. It was mine. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Clean, cold, efficient. Chloe handled everything like the boss she is, shutting down every possible loophole before Brandon could even think about pushing back. He signed the papers without protest. No final speech. No last ditch, let's fix this. Just his signature on the dotted line and a silent surrender to the mess he'd made. And, honestly, it was perfect. No drama, no closure talk, just done. A few days later, I was going through some old paperwork when I found a photo of us. Early days, me and Brandon, arms around each other, smiling like we had it all figured out. I stared at it for a long second. Yeah, there were good moments. And for a while, I believed in what we had. Believed that we were building something real. But that version of us? It was gone. buried under years of emotional neglect, subtle manipulation, and a betrayal that made my stomach twist just thinking about it. I didn't throw the photo away. Not yet. I just slipped it into an envelope and tucked it into a drawer. Out of sight. A chapter closed, not erased, just shelved. It was part of my past, but it didn't define me anymore. That night, Lauren and I hit a rooftop bar downtown to celebrate the divorce being finalized. The air was warm, the skyline glittered, and I felt light in a way I hadn't felt in years. She raised her cocktail and grinned. "Girl, you're glowing. Single life looks good on you." I laughed, like really, genuinely laughed. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules." We toasted to that. And with every clink of the glass, I felt it, pride. Not just because I survived one of the hardest seasons of my life, but because I walked through the fire and came out stronger. I didn't just rebuild, I reclaimed. Back at home, I started planning for what's next. The apartment had become more than just four walls. It was my sanctuary. A symbol of every boundary I'd set, every voice I'd reclaimed, every time I chose myself. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't stay forever. Eventually, I'd move to a new space. One untouched by his memory. One that held only me. But until then, I was going to live the hell out of every moment in the space I fought so hard to keep. That night, curled up on the couch with the city lights dancing outside my window, I thought back to that phone call. The one where Brandon actually laughed, while telling me he was divorcing me and selling the home out from under me. So sure, he'd won. And all I could do was smile. Because his arrogance? That was his downfall. And my quiet strength? That was my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something so much better. A new chapter, where I wrote every line. One where I called the shots. One where I chose peace, joy, and freedom on my terms.